It's time we spoke honestly, said Anna, the eldest daughter, a lawyer from Albuquerque, her voice steady and firm. This house, the land, the garden even, the stocks they've saved, we should divide everything now, before it turns into a problem later. James, the second son, a struggling businessman, nodded in agreement. Exactly. Not all of us are as well off as Michael. Mom and Dad are over 70. Things should be handled fairly. The word fairly echoed coldly, like a gust of wind slicing through Eleanor's heart. In contrast to the beauty of the land she's lived on for the past 70 years. How beautiful is it, really? Eleanor, would you share that with our audience?
Oh, of course I will. Santa Fe, New Mexico, where golden sunlight doesn't burn, but softens like silk draped across the sky. The little town rests gently among rolling hills, where sagebrush and blooming cacti stretch out their soft purple petals like whispers from Mother Earth. The air is fresh, as if every breeze was filtered through a timeless world, back when people walked slower and listened to the language of the grass and trees. The adobe homes square, warm terracotta dot the dusty paths, and each morning, the scent of coffee blends with wild herbs. Wind chimes sing quietly, and sunlight leans through wooden windows, creating a dreamlike atmosphere where time seems to slow down.
Thank you, Eleanor. Now, if I may, let me briefly tell your story. Would that be all right?
Of course. I'll be right here with you all. Here, everyone has a place. If even one person wants to listen, wants to understand, I'll share. But I'm not very good at telling stories. That part, I'll leave to you.
Thank you, Eleanor. I'll begin now. Are you still listening, friend? She would be so happy if you could feel what she felt. And we'd love to know where in the world are you listening from. Thank you for being here. Eleanor Parker's family, a woman over 70, lives in one of these adobe houses on the edge of the city. Eleanor is the epitome of a loving mother and grandmother, gentle, thoughtful, with a quiet beauty that comes from having weathered many seasons. She lives with her husband, Frank Parker, a retired electrical engineer from Colorado who now spends his time painting and tending to their vegetable garden. Nearby, their 3 children live in their own homes, not too far, but not close enough to truly connect on a deep emotional level. The Parker family, from the outside, appears to lead a peaceful life. But, like any river that appears calm, beneath the surface, there are subtle currents no one can see. One fall evening, as the cottonwood leaves begin to turn pale yellow and the owl's hoot echoes through the canyon, Eleanor feels that something is shifting. It's not the weather, but something in the hearts of those she loves. And then it came. During what seemed like a normal family meeting, when the children began discussing the inheritance of the family's property. What seemed like a simple matter of paperwork and assets turned out to be cracks in the soul, small earthquakes beginning to shake the heart of a mother. It was a weekend afternoon. The wind from the western desert blowing dry, carrying the scent of pinon trees, and the sound of wind chimes clinking together like a mysterious whisper between souls. The Parker family gathered in the living room, where the late afternoon light filtered through the large windows, casting irregular patches of light onto the worn wooden floor. Frank sat silently in the corner of the room, still holding a pencil and an unfinished sketchbook. Eleanor, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, tried to keep her heart calm, as she always did. But today, something felt different. The words spoken this time carried no love, only demands. We think it's time to be clear. Anna, the eldest daughter, a lawyer in Albuquerque, spoke decisively. This house, the land, the garden, even the stocks you've saved, we should divide them now, to avoid any issues later. James, the second son, a businessman facing financial difficulties, agreed. Right. Not everyone is as well off as Michael. Mom and Dad are over 70. Everything should be arranged fairly. The word fair rang out cold, like a gust of wind slicing through Eleanor's heart. She never imagined that one day her own children, the ones she had raised with such care, would sit there, discussing dividing her life's work into pieces through things she had spent her entire life nurturing. No one spoke of memories. No one mentioned the tough winters when Eleanor sewed clothes for her children from old curtains. No one remembered the garden in the back, where Frank had planted cherry trees for their daughter's wedding photos. It was just numbers, ownership, and legal papers. Eleanor said nothing. She clenched her hands together to keep calm. Inside, something seemed to break, not from pain, but from the helplessness of seeing love no longer enough to hold on to what was sacred. She looked toward Michael, the youngest son, who worked at a meditation center in northern Santa Fe. He sat quietly by the window, the light from the setting sun casting soft shadows on his calm face. Throughout the meeting, Michael said nothing, gave no opinion, made no demands. He only gently poured more tea for his mother, and when she looked at him, he smiled, a quiet smile, one that held something deep within. "I don't need anything," Michael finally spoke, his voice soft as the wind. "I just want you both to be at peace. The land can be divided, the assets can be divided, but don't let the love also be divided." His words fell in the room like a soft drop of water in the desert. But no one responded. The drama had erupted. James loudly accused Michael of being a hypocrite, while Anna grew visibly uncomfortable. "No one wants to hurt Mom, but we're talking about reality. And the reality is, Mom and Dad can't live forever." Eleanor couldn't take it any longer. She left the room, her hand lightly gripping the arm of the chair, as if holding on to both her physical and emotional strength. Frank watched her go, his eyes dimming behind his glasses, but he didn't stop her. He understood she needed time, needed space. In the living room, the debate raged on, cutting through the once peaceful memories of a family that had once been so close. That evening, the full moon poured down its light onto the adobe roof, illuminating the time-worn cracks on the walls. Inside, the sound of desert insects blended with the soft whistle of the wind through the window, creating a tranquil harmony, a calm only found in the land of Santa Fe, where time seems to move slower. Eleanor sat alone in her old rocking chair, the same place where she once read stories to her children on summer nights long ago. But now, the room only held the creaking of wood and her weary breath. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the voices from the afternoon, attempting to reconnect with something soft within her soul that had been torn by harsh words, cold glances, and cruel realities. The door opened quietly. Michael entered, still carrying that quiet presence, his eyes deep and gentle, like the earth after rain. He sat down on the floor, right by her feet. "Michael," she called softly, "why didn't you take your share? This land belongs to our ancestors. It's yours too." Michael looked up at her but didn't answer immediately. He placed a hand on his chest, as if listening to something deep within. "Mom," he began, "there was a time when I wanted to claim it all. Not just the land, but the recognition, the love, my place in the family. But I lost it all." Eleanor was surprised. Michael had always been the quiet one, the least vocal. She hadn't known he had gone through such a deep period of darkness. Michael shared his story. "It was 3 years ago when my startup failed. I lost my direction, lost my faith, and almost didn't want to live anymore. I wandered all the way south to the outskirts of the Navajo Desert. There, I met an old man, long silver hair, living in a mud hut. They called him Thomas the Silent. He lived alone, often sitting under the old juniper tree by the canyon, never saying a word. Yet he made me feel like I could speak my heart freely." He paused, his gaze distant, like the night breeze sweeping across the distant Sangre de Cristo mountains. One day, he invited me to meditate with him beneath the tree. At first, my mind was chaotic, but slowly, bit by bit, he taught me to see the roots of my mind, the fear, the longing to be loved, the need to prove my worth. Then he said, "The human mind is like desert sand. The harder you try to grip it, the more it slips through your fingers. But if you sit still and just watch, you will see the sun's reflection in every grain of sand." Eleanor was silent. Michael continued, "From then on, I learned to sit still. I learned to observe the pain, the hurt, and the desires. Gradually, they dissolved like steam in the desert wind. I no longer felt the need to prove anything or fight for anything. I just wanted to live with a peaceful heart, and if I could, share that peace with others, with you, Mom." Eleanor's gaze lingered on her youngest son's face. She saw in his eyes the figure of the Navajo man beneath the juniper tree, but through the form of her child. "I think you should meet him," Michael said. "Not to meditate, not to change anything, but just to sit with someone who doesn't ask anything from you like he did with me." Eleanor didn't answer. She only held her son's hand, a hand calloused from years of gardening at the meditation center, and sighed. But it wasn't the sigh of despair. It was the first breath she'd taken in a long time that felt lighter. That morning, Santa Fe had just finished a night storm. The earth still carried the scent of the old rain. The warm aroma of red earth mingled with the fresh scent of newly blooming wildflowers. Spring winds gently swept through the adobe roof, carrying the pale golden light of the early day, filtering through the junipers and across the dreamy valley still damp with morning mist. Eleanor slowly walked out onto the porch, holding her old shawl. Michael was already waiting outside the gate, his eyes as calm as ever, but deeper, as though he knew today would be the day she made her decision. "I want to meet him," she said. "I don't know what for, but I want to go." Michael didn't say anything. He simply nodded and extended his hand. They walked along the dirt road leading out to the edge of town. The adobe rooftops faded behind them, replaced by rolling sand dunes, blooming cactus flowers, and the distant sound of woodpeckers. In the distance, the snow-capped peaks of the Jemez Mountains glistened under the high sun. It took nearly an hour to cross the thick juniper bushes and the dry, faded grasses. Finally, they reached their destination, a small mud hut nestled beside a low stone ridge, next to an ancient juniper tree with a twisted trunk that seemed to be praying to the sky. The Navajo elder, Thomas the Silent, sat on a flat stone in front of the hut. His skin was weathered from the sun, his face full of wrinkles, but his eyes were clear and still, like a fall lake. He looked at Eleanor. No greeting, no ceremony, no judgment. He just smiled. A smile as deep and wide as the desert sky. They sat together beneath the tree. No one spoke for a long while. A gentle breeze blew. A meadowlark flew by, singing a few notes into the air. Then Thomas spoke, his voice hoarse but warm. "If today were your last day, what would you want to carry with you?" The question fell into Eleanor's heart like a drop of water into a still pond. She looked up at him, into his eyes that neither condemned nor pitied, but were simply present. She began to cry. Not in loud sobs, but in slow, steady tears, like spring water flowing through snow. The layers of pain, anger, resentment, and the silent loneliness of an aging mother broke apart. In complete silence, she felt herself lighter. She didn't answer him. She only closed her eyes, and behind her eyelids, she saw the childhood of her children. She saw Michael climbing the old peach tree in the backyard. She saw the family dinners, the laughter, and her husband waiting at home, tired from loving so much. A gentle hand touched hers. It was Michael. Thomas stood up, said nothing more, and slowly walked into the hut. His figure melted into the bright desert light. Eleanor remained seated, her hand gently holding her son's, the wind ruffling through her silver hair, but in her heart everything was still as the noonday sun. Eleanor returned home as the evening descended. The sunset bathed the adobe rooftops in a golden glow, like honey being poured. The wind from the highlands blew in, carrying the scent of sweet grass and damp earth. No one asked where she had been. Only Michael, quietly preparing dinner in the small kitchen, occasionally glancing at her with a knowing look, as though he already understood everything. But life is not a fairy tale, and peace does not come easily. Just a few days later, the family meeting was held again, this time with the presence of a lawyer. They spoke of paperwork, inheritance, dividing the land. Voices clashed, sharp and cold, each sentence cutting through the fragile peace that had been left. Eleanor sat there. She listened, but no longer participated with her heart. The harsh words still flew across the room, but they no longer reached her. In her mind, only one question echoed. If today were my last day, what would I want to carry with me? And the answer was always, not these disputes. That evening, after everyone had left, she wrote a letter. Her handwriting was slow, a little shaky, but each sentence, each word, was calm. She didn't blame anyone. She simply told Michael's story, about the old friend on the edge of the desert, about the question that had changed her, and about the choice to let go in order to preserve things deeper than wealth, things like family, wisdom, and inner freedom. She folded the letter and left it on the table. No note attached. The next day, when the children returned, they read the letter. One cried. One silently withdrew the lawsuit. One left without saying a word. But something had begun to change. No one spoke of it. But from that day on, voices grew softer, gazes gentler, hugs longer, and Michael remained quietly steadfast like a lantern, burning slowly, yet warming the entire house. Later that evening, Eleanor stepped out onto the porch. Before her, the Santa Fe sun was sinking behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, leaving a trail of vibrant red across the thin, cloud-dappled sky. The breeze gently stirred the wildflowers in the garden. The flowers kept blooming, despite the disputes, despite the pain. She took a deep breath, the first time in many years. And in that breath, she felt her heart light as a cloud drifting by, passing through spring, summer, and the seasons of life with a quiet, profound peace. The bell has tolled, not to end, but to begin a new life within. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters,